Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. It's all smiles as Celtic defeat Ross County by 4-1. We understand that during this particular broadcast there will be the draw for the quarter-final, so keep us updated in the comment section as to the outcome of that. Laura Bradburn and Alan Morrison obviously were at the pre-match and half-time bulletins, so let's cover the game as a whole. It turned out pretty comfortable in the end, Laura. There was a wee scare. We've been asking the question who should start at centre half against Rangers, all of that kind of stuff. But let's start off with the positive. Another win. That's 6-6 for Celtic, and that's twice up at Ross County, which has previously been a difficult ground to get a result at.
Yeah, it has been. I think the biggest compliment I can pay this team, having watched that, is they dispatched Ross County in the way that the gap between the squads would suggest they should dispatch them. We saw very often last season and in previous seasons before that Dingwall is a difficult place to go, and we've struggled to beat them at various points. And yeah, I think psychology plays a lot into sport, and obviously ability isn't the only thing that determines a win. But what I'm loving about this team is they've got the psychological element of the domestic game down, and they appear to be able to utilise their skills and their abilities to the full extent. They don't let teams get in their heads. They don't let teams bully them. They don't let teams use other means by which to upset their game. And they seem to be able to imprint themselves on any match that they go into. This one was no different. And yet again, we've had a situation where not only are we scoring loads of goals, but they're coming from all over the team. And it just seems like as long as things keep going the way they're going, it's going to take either a very significant off day on the part of our team or a very significant exceptional performance from another team domestically to really give us a challenge. Europe is obviously a different kettle of fish, and I'm sure something we'll come on to discuss, if not tonight, then in the build-up to next week. But I certainly can't see domestically anyway us having any great challenge in the near future.
Yeah, we spoke about 3 big games in 7 days, the 3 R's, Ross County, Rangers and Real Madrid. And Alan, you can't set yourself up any better than Ange has done, and this group of players have done. 6 wins in 6. As Laura says, we've made that particularly difficult ground just look like a normal, dare I say, run-of-the-mill away fixture now. And it's all credit to Ange and his team. We will pick the performance apart. We'll look at some performances. Let's start off then with Aaron Mooy. Aaron Mooy is signed hardly to a fanfare. He's a free agent. People were concerned. Some people were concerned he hadn't had a club since January. Ange knew him well. We know the story. He comes in tonight. I thought he looked very impressive. What was your take on that?
Yeah, no, definitely. He did impress me. He played, unlike the cameos that we've seen where Celtic have been in control. Well, they were in control of this game as well. But in terms of on the scoreboard, when he's come on and he's been able to sort of feel his way in. So how would he react under pressure in terms of the opposition are at full kind of speed, as it were, fitness. It's 0-0. Is he going to change the game? Is he going to influence the game? And he was absolutely the perfect player to be playing in that midfield role in a possession dominant side. He doesn't try to do ridiculously silly things. If he has to pass it backwards, he passes it backwards. If there's a forward pass on, his accuracy is excellent. And so in terms of that decision making, that ability to keep the ball under pressure, he's got good balance. He can take a challenge and maintain control of the ball, which is something I always look at, because that's something that not so good technical players fall down under. He was just very, very calm, very like he was just playing as if he was playing in his slippers, almost, sort of thing. So again, it's Ross County, but the most pleasing thing for me is it's another game where we're racking up, even though we've made like 9 changes. We've got the control. It's another 75% possession game. The control's there. 20 shots to 7. The penetration's there. 4 goals scored. and we're doing this game after game after game. And you might think, well, it's Ross County, it's a town of 5,000 people, whatever it is. But listen, you've got to give Ross County a lot of credit, I think. I mean, they never stopped. They were flying in, especially in the second half, they were flying at Celtic. They were trying to make contact at every opportunity. They never stopped running. They never stopped harrying. They never stopped closing down. It's a miracle every season they lose players because they can't afford to have them on long contracts, and then they replace them with other players. It's not an easy job. So I think they deserve great credit. And it isn't the case in football that if you want to be 4 times better than a team, you spend 4 times the money. If you want to subjugate teams to the level that Manchester City do, that PSG do in their league, that Juventus have done for 10 years in Italy, you have to spend 100 times more to get that level of subjugation. And Celtic have got that advantage. But if we all know ourselves, you think back over the last 20 years, even when we've had even Martin O'Neill teams and Brendan Rodgers' teams, we weren't scoring this volume of goals or creating this number of chances. The difference, you have to pay a lot of money to make a tiny marginal difference in the quality of the player that you're bringing in. So it isn't a straight line relationship between money spent and quality received. So what we're seeing here is what Celtic should be doing given the wage differential, but we haven't done that. Certainly in the last 10 years, we haven't done that. If you look at Ajax historically in the Dutch league, there'll be 6s and 7s and 5s on a quite a regular basis. Porto the same in Portugal, and we've not done that. And it might sound crazy to say this for a club that's won 10 out of the last 11 leagues, but we've actually underperformed in that regard. We haven't been as dominant in our own league in terms of goal scoring and that. And I know that's going to sound idiotic to people, but if you look upon it as in a sort of wage to outcome basis, we've almost kind of underperformed, and certainly in cup competitions we have. So this is actually Celtic as they should be, as dominant as they should be. That's the job that Ange has done. I think that's credit. 9 changes.
100%. And this, Alan, I remember last season getting a phone call unexpectedly from an old football coach of mine. Must have been old, Laura, if it was a football coach of mine. Hadn't
No
spoken
comment.
to him. Yeah, in about 20 years. I hadn't spoken to him in about 20 years. And he was telling me, I always recall, he was one of the guys that used to get on my bus, the supporters bus that ran out of Valleyfield and Blair Hall in the villages. Mick Hutton is his name, if you're listening. Mick, I hope you're well. And he was telling me, he said, Paul, I've watched Celtic since the 1950s, and this is the best football side I have watched.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, wow, surely not. And all that time, I mean, he was at the 3 European finals. He was in Lisbon, he was in Milan, he was in Seville, and he came away with that comment. And I remember mentioning it on the broadcast the next time I was on, because I was astonished with that. Because when someone like Mick, his name is Mick Hutton, when someone like that tells you that, and you know the wealth of experience they have watching Celtic, you take notice of that. So it is interesting, and I think this season we're getting version 2, Laura, not only of the team,
Sorry, Paul, I'm away to Motherwell. Apologies.
Away to Motherwell.
Yeah.
Sorry,
No, absolutely. That was a decent result for them tonight, actually. They're a side that definitely have had that new manager bounce. I don't know if that's something that you agree or disagree with, but they've done pretty well away to Motherwell. Laura, we'll get your reaction on that. What do you think?
Well, to go back to the first thing you were going to say, I think you were going along the lines of, this is version 2 of Ange and the next evolution of the team and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I think it proves what everybody was saying was, way back at the start when we appointed Ange, this thing of, giving him a little bit of time will pay off for us. Everybody who knew Ange before we did said that, you'll get the dividends, whether it's 6 months, 9 months, a year down the line, and we're certainly seeing that. And I think it also proves as well, there's plenty of reasons to dislike the Celtic board and dislike the way the club's run, and some of the decisions that have been made over the past few years have certainly not been to mine or anybody else's liking. But one way in which I think they have acted I wouldn't want to say admirably, just because that makes me makes my stomach turn talking about the Celtic board in that way. But one way in which I think they've impressed me is in their backing of Ange. You know, he's obviously been given access to funds. He's been given the reins as far as making the signings is concerned. He's been allowed to identify players he wants and to bring them in because he knows they're the players that are going to do the job he needs done. And it just shows as well that A, appointing the right manager, and then B, trusting that manager to do what he does best is the way that you breed success at a football club. And I sincerely hope that for as long as Ange remains in the job, he continues to get the support that he has been getting so far, both in the boardroom and from the fans, because I think he wholeheartedly deserves it. As far as the draw against Motherwell, it's going to be difficult just from the point of view it's another away game. I would have preferred a home game for Celtic for obvious reasons, but at this point of view, looking at the teams left in the draw, as I said before, I wouldn't really have minded whoever we got because I just feel so confident in this team that we can beat whoever's put in front of us at the moment.
It's a great feeling. It really is a great feeling. And what he has there is he's got the kind of flair of the Tommy Burns Celtic. You know, the Tommy Burns era Celtic, he's got the flair. But what he also has is he's got an ability actually for the team to win. And often it's in a scenario where, against all odds, we still manage to grind out results as well. And I think that when you're looking at this Ange Postecoglou team, I remember an analogy that our very own Kevin Graham came up with regarding what Ange could do if he walked into your kitchen and he could cook you a gourmet meal, even if you had a tin of hot dogs and some baked beans. And by the way, that was the job he did last season when he came in, because Celtic were in such a poor state and there was so much needing done. And as Alan said before the game, he done just enough to get us up to that January transfer window. Then he brings in another 4. Other than Idiguchi, every one of them were tremendous in the second half of last season. And we're now seeing Ange in full flow, something that we were told about by the likes of Jared Hill and Dan Orowitz and these types of people who had watched Ange's evolution as a manager. And fair play to them for coming on and telling guys like me and others that we were maybe wrong or a wee bit harsh on Ange at the beginning. Scott Howe, great win, said 4-1, superb, well done to Scott. Good prediction. Dermot, Celtic, Rabbitoh. It's a wet Sydney down dawn for the first day of spring, but the boys have brought the sunshine to my day. Absolutely. You'll be looking forward to a visit from Celtic quite shortly as well. Brown Warrior, 6 second half subs, 1 minute added on. Me too. Yeah, Brown, I'm sure Colin will be commenting on that as well. It's one of his pet hates, isn't it, when we're not getting the injury time required. Johnny Ryan, Hacks are very positive, looking good, right? So I do have Haksabanovic's debut on the talking point. He was only on the park for 15 minutes, Alan, but he looks a very direct, sharp, dynamic talent so far. And I think, again, the circumstances around getting him for, what was it, £1.5 million were such that we certainly are not getting a £1.5 million player in Haksabanovic, are we?
No, so just before I get into that, this thing about the subs, and I totally agree, by the way, I even wrote an article on this, on Celtic by Numbers, where it is a feature of Celtic games in particular, when Celtic are winning by a lot of goals, no time is added on at the end. And I know it's one of these things that you look very churlish in making a fuss about, but when goal difference matters, it's a professional league at the end of the day. All you're asking for is the rules to be applied, really. But the other thing that I'll say as well is that it isn't 6 subs. 6 players might have come on, but the subs were in 2 or 3 tranches. So there's only actually 2 or 3 moments when subs were brought on. So you don't. It's not 30 times 6. It's 30 times 3 because there was 3 moments when subs were brought on. If that makes sense. Yeah. So Haksabanovic, very excited to see him. I mean, listen, again, this is a very different way for Celtic to do business in terms of getting this player, because Rubin Kazan are a club in distress. They've been relegated from the Russian Premier League. They're obviously players who are not Russian nationals are looking to leave the club, and then obviously there's all the sanctions as well, limitations that they're working under. And Celtic have gone and basically, taken advantage of a distressed seller, and it's business, and it's nasty, and it's not very nice. But you'd rather that your club was on the positive end of that than on the receiving end of it. And so to get a player like him, who I can't remember how much he went to Kazan for, was it 8 million or something like that? Was it more? Maybe
was it 8 million euros? I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. For, like you say, I don't know what the final fee was, and I don't know. Just as an aside, I don't know how the deal was actually, how Celtic managed to do the deal, because obviously the sanctions against Russian team. Celtic cannot deposit money into a Russian bank account. So I'm not sure how they kind of got around that. I'm sure. But anyway, in terms of his debut, in terms of his performance, like you said, I think direct is a really good way of putting it. He just looked to get the ball forward quickly. So what I always look for is first touch, balance, and then what's their intent. And he's looked like another player that's got low center of gravity, a good first touch, and a really direct intent with the ball. So very exciting, very early days, but really enthusiastic to see him. And I think there's going to be a lot more to come.
A quality addition by the looks of him, Laura, and the intent is the one thing. From the very first moment he gets that ball, he wants to make things happen, and I really am excited to see more of him. I don't expect there to be a shock inclusion in the starting lineup next week, but you never know. I do remember Tommy Burns used to say that sometimes in a big game you can throw someone in and it takes away the nerves because they don't expect to play. But we will see. Now, I want to talk, we looked at the goals obviously in the first half. We were 2-0 up. I don't want to put a dampener on anything, but it did spark the discussion around the centre-half position that we've already spoken about, when on 67 minutes it went to 2-1. Jakaviti scores a goal, and it was poor, Laura, from Celtic's perspective, and it was poor, I think, on two counts. First of all, Starfelt gets caught napping under the ball, something that Alan Morrison had picked up on in the first half, in the pre-match rather, and then Jens is slow to react. So we lose the first, we lose the second, and ultimately we lose a goal. And at that point, there was a discussion raging between us all about who starts on, well, who partners Carter Vickers, let's be honest, against Rangers. Where are you on that one, Laura?
With regard to the goal specifically, I think, like you said, that Alan hit the nail on the head about Starfelt, being caught under the ball. And I think on this occasion, it was more to do with the fact that he wasn't anticipating the positioning of the ball, so he was kind of backpedaling and couldn't get, enough momentum into the jump. And therefore the Ross County player who knocked it across the goal managed to outjump him. But if that's your job as a defender, is to anticipate where the ball's going to be and position yourself in a way that means that you're able to win it. So from that point of view, I wasn't very happy with that. But got a lot of criticism in the comments about my comments before the match about Starfelt. I wouldn't be being honest if I wasn't the same about Jens in that situation. He two things he did that quite annoyed me was, one, he seemed to stop tracking his man in the middle of the goal, and left him completely open to get on to the end of that knockdown. And the other thing was, he looked as if he was claiming for offside and had completely stopped playing when obviously the Ross County player hadn't. So the two lessons are, keep to your man and obviously play to the whistle as well. Two very sort of basic things that I wouldn't have thought he would need to be told, but obviously did need to be told. And it's just a reminder of the fact that you need to remain switched on at all times, and on that occasion we weren't. In terms of who my selection would be for the Rangers game on Saturday, I'm very stuck between my choice. I still wouldn't go with Starfelt personally. I think Stephen Welsh yet again came in and proved that he is a more than adequate replacement for anybody. I still believe he's underappreciated purely because he's an academy graduate and we didn't sign him from any far-flung club or anything like that. So I was very close to saying Stephen Welsh, but I think Jens edges it for me, and Jens would be my preferred partner for Cameron Carter-Vickers at the weekend.
It's interesting because I agree with you. I think Welsh looked very assured when he came in. I think that it goes on these runs now, doesn't he, where he actually makes really good progress. I'm not quite saying he's at Ayer's level of doing that yet, but he certainly does go on these runs, wanders with the ball, and he's pretty good at it with the ball at his feet as well. And let's just hope that the injury he sustained doesn't keep him out. It would be good to be in the running for all four, actually, to be in the running for a starting berth against Rangers. I'm going to throw this one out at you as well, Alan. And the reason we highlight these points, even when it's a good result, isn't because we're doom and gloom and looking for negatives. It's so that, we're not talking about this type of thing at nothing each against Real Madrid. When we switch off for that moment, Alan, and you say, well, the warning signs were there against Ross County away, but we never spoke about that because we won 4-1. So it is important to highlight it, and it was pretty disappointing goal to lose, wasn't it?
Yeah, and listen, I don't even look at things in that way, because to me, a performance, I look at the performance, right? Irrespective of the score, it's the performance, and every performance has good points and bad points and things that you could do better, right? And that's every player, and that's every game. Even when you win 9-0, believe it or not. So there are things you can do better. So that's the way I look at it. So if people get upset and just want to hear happy clappy stuff, then I'm not going to apologise, because that's just not what I do. So the goal itself was just classic Sunday League rubbish, wasn't it? Big long ball into the box, win the header, bundle it in. It was just horrible goal. But give them credit. Again, I'm not going to be sniffy about it. Ross County, that was going to be the best way for them to score, and they executed it really well. So credit to them. The good news is I don't suspect Real Madrid will play like that. So I think we might get ripped apart a few times down the left, but down our right. But they certainly won't be lumping high balls into the mixer for the big lad. Yeah, and listen, I've said to Starfelt, he again gets caught under the ball again. Jordan White, who wasn't good enough to play for Falkirk, but he can win a header against a much smaller man. What wins it, and then as you say, there's probably a bit of a collective sleepiness about then responding to that second ball. So yeah, disappointing, right? But I think to be more positive. But again, I'm not doing it to be positive. It's just the reality. The truth is that another feature of this season, and even since December, January time, is we're relatively speaking, we're giving up very few chances. Very few chances at all. So there wasn't a lot on top of that. There was one shot from outside the box because I think McCarthy fell over. Or I think Giacomakis slipped and then McCarthy slipped. And then that allowed them to get a shot off, and Siegrist made a good save. And there was probably a couple of moments when there was decent crosses. But again, you're not looking at Siegrist scrambling about his box. They had a few shots. None of them were of what high XG, if you want to put it that way. So that's a theme that's being, and I think that's to do with some of that's to do certainly domestically with just the sheer intensity that Celtic play on the rare occasions that the opposition do get the ball. Have you actually got the energy and the concentration to actually and the willpower to get forward, having been so deep defending, to then create something? And it's really difficult to do that. And I think that intensity that Celtic play at has a cumulative effect as the game goes on, and it becomes harder and harder. That's why Celtic, as I say, 2 goals conceded past the 70th minute in a year, and that's because of that cumulative impact of how Celtic harry the opposition. So yeah, it was a disappointing goal. Nothing that we haven't seen before from those players involved, unfortunately. But in the round, I don't think we'll concede too many this season domestically.
Yeah, and absolutely the reaction to that goal 5 minutes later was for Celtic to go further ahead and regain the 2-goal advantage, Laura. I've got a couple of points to bring up. Adams, first of all, Ralston shouting at the boys to gear them up to go again with 1 minute to go is what we love to see. 100% agree with that. Feed the Bear had 4-0 Celtic. Well done the Hoops, just wish they never scored. My bet 4-0 would have been up. Not sure how much you stood to win on that. Please gamble responsibly, everybody. Egyptian King. Mooy controlled that midfield lovely tonight. Yeah, absolutely. We've been giving him praise this evening. I think that he has changed a lot of people's minds about him, those who were kind of writing him off. And the reason I bring this one up here, Michael Ross, we don't stop, is because I remember that mic'd up training session well. And I do remember some pundits, ex-players saying, what's he doing that's any different? That's the kind of stuff you get day in, day out on the training ground. And I thought it was a wee bit dismissive of some ex-players. But worse than that tonight was a co-commentator who also was an ex-player, who is never, ever tired of telling us that David Turnbull wants to play his football in England. And he said a couple of things tonight. And I'm going to bring them up, right? Because the first one was, after a tackle went in where Turnbull himself, I think it was fouled. Unfortunately, you can't leave the ground. Oh, nice one. So when you're tackling a Celtic player, it's very unfortunate that you can't do that with both feet off the ground. And then in the first half, after a 9-0 drubbing against Dundee United, Malcolm Mackay will have told his players to make contact with Celtic players. What does that mean, Laura? Does that mean you've got to tackle over the ball, make contact, actually injure Celtic players? The comments you get from this guy time and time again are so anti-Celtic that it's that's the reason I'm bringing it up. And it frustrates the life out of me because we have had so many injuries where players have not been protected. We banged on about it last season, Laura. And when you're coming up, and by the way, I think Malcolm Mackay's done a great job at Ross County. If Dundee United are not considering him for the vacant manager's job, they probably should be. But you can't be looking at an opposition team and thinking, well, just hack Celtic players. It's the only way that you can stop them.
Listen, it's not the first time we've seen a pundit of Scottish football insinuating that people should be using excess physical force against their players. We all saw what Chris Boyd had to say last season about testing Callum McGregor's mask. I think Stephen Craigan and players of his ilk are unfortunately not very gifted footballers for all that they've achieved in the game and getting to the top level as they have. And with that lack of ability, they have only one option, and that's to take the ball by force in these situations and not by guile or by skill. But it's exactly the same reason why these professionals came out and berated Ange for saying we never stop in the training sessions. You can bet your bottom dollar Stephen Craigan would never be anywhere near an Ange Postecoglou side because he wouldn't understand the tactics he was given, and he wouldn't understand the fact that he has to actually play football rather than turn it into a wrestling match. I was disappointed to hear some of that stuff in the first half, and that's why I ended up muting the commentary that I did have in the second half, because to be perfectly honest, it's one of these situations. I like to listen to commentators and co-commentators who teach me things about the game. Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, for all their faults, are excellent pundits and really do a great job on Monday Night Football of breaking down the game. And as somebody who obviously has never played professionally, I like to be educated by the people I listen to, and that's unfortunately not the case with Stephen Craigan.
No, that's a great shout. Alan Morrison, obviously, you are watching from afar this evening. What's your take on it? Because, I mean, when you're watching a team that really is trying to play entertaining football, and you're an ex-footballer, surely the first go-to kind of response to that shouldn't be that you stop them by any means necessary.
No, I suppose my opinion is that he's really just reflecting probably a prevalent culture within the game in terms of, when you're playing against a superior team, and let's face it, every week, whenever the rest of the league is playing against Celtic and the Rangers, they're not going to get a lot of the ball, 25% possession, that sort of thing. And when you're talking about making contact, what you're really talking about is you don't want to just stand off and watch the other team pass around you, right? You want to make it as difficult as you can. So you can't make your players better. You can't turn them into, Brazilian beach footballers or whatever. But what you can do, what is within your gift, is to work hard to close down the opposition and to make sure that they're not comfortable in what they're doing. They're not getting easy passes. They're not being able to get the ball, stop, turn, go forward. You're on to them. You're putting pressure on them. You're making them go backwards. I'm being generous here, but that's the sort of spirit of what he was saying. And football coaches up and down the country would be giving those instructions whenever you're playing a team that's clearly a lot better technically than you and is going to have a lot more of the ball. So I don't think there's anything particularly sinister in it. It's just a it's just a paradigm within football that's commonly used. He's probably looking at it, to be fair, from the perspective of how are Ross County thinking. I'm sure, there's plenty of Celtic pundits and what have you. What would be the Ross County perspective on the scheme? How would they set up? How do you stop a team like Celtic? Which I think is a fair comment. I think it's a fair perspective to get, to be honest.
How do you stop a team like Celtic? That is going to be the question, hopefully, throughout the season, Alan. And let's not forget the last 2 goals then. So Maeda makes it 3-1 5 minutes after Ross County looked to be making a game of it. Laura, I make it 9 goals and 28 appearances for Maeda. I thought he played particularly well. He was very quick to react to the shot by Callum McGregor. And then the 4th goal to wrap up the win, Jamesy Forrest. And by the way, Ralston's assist again. I think that's his 12th assist. He's always great for an assist. 447 games for Jamesy Forrest. He's now on 98 goals and 99 assists, Laura. And we were having a wee chat before we came on live about, some of the comments we've been hearing about Forrest should go and all this kind of stuff. I don't see that happening. We've given him a new contract, quite a lengthy deal that should probably see him right up to the end of his career. And although he's not going to start every game, I think, in terms of the squads and the experience that he brings to it, he is a player that I would like, and not for sentimental reasons, I would like to see him, making the 500 appearances, getting the testimonial, finishing his career at Celtic, and contributing like he did tonight.
There was 2 things I really liked about that James Forrest goal. One was his reaction to scoring the goal was a look of utter relief off of his face, which I was glad to see. And also Anthony Ralston, when he made the assist, you saw him pointing at Forrest after he scored the goal, kind of almost a kind of I knew you still had it in you kind of thing, which was nice as well. Listen, I've talked at length on this podcast about previous situations in which sentimentality has got the better of Celtic and where we've used it to our disadvantage rather than our advantage. I'm not sitting here saying James Forrest deserves a starting berth or anywhere near it in the Celtic team. I think tonight was an example of actually just how limited his game has become as he's aged. But at the same time, I think it's not without beyond the realms of possibility to say James Forrest can decide if and when he wants to leave Celtic. He's won so many medals for this club. He's scored so many goals. He is, without doubt, whether people think he's the most gifted footballer we've ever had or not, he's a Celtic great, and I think he deserves to be given the respect of deciding when he leaves the club. Now, I don't see a problem with doing that as long as you don't use him inappropriately and use him when the game doesn't dictate that he's worth using. And I think that's the way you can apply sentimentality in the right way rather than the wrong way. So I say for as long as James Forrest wants to be a Celtic player, he can be, but just make sure whoever's the manager uses him only if and when he's able to provide something good for us.
Yeah, and he is a player, Alan, who has come under a lot of criticism. But I just look at the amount of managers that he's played under and the amount of managers who have kept him as a Celtic player. And I do think that he is an important cog in the big Ange Postecoglou machine. He's not going to be playing every week. But surely a player like Abada can learn a lot from Jamesy Forrest as well.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're adults, right? And surely we can have an adult conversation that allows us to hold 2 simultaneous thoughts in our head. One is that James Forrest has been a magnificent servant for Celtic, is put into that sort of legendary status. The number of trophies he's won is just phenomenal. And it's we can hold that thought in our heads and recognise that and celebrate that. Also, at the same time, recognising that age regression waits for no one. It happens quicker for a winger than it does for any other position. Speed is the first thing that goes. And on those things also happen to be true at the same time. Okay? Sorry, but that's just the way it is. Now, Postecoglou has been very clear that he values Forrest's position within the squad. And he sees him as somebody who, because of his knowledge of Celtic, his experience, what he's like around the training ground, his standards, the way he conducts himself, that he is an important part of the squad, and I'm absolutely fine with that. So I completely agree with Laura that listen, we've not bought Haksabanovic because we're going to give James Forrest loads of minutes. I mean, that doesn't make any sense, right? So we've got Haksabanovic, we've got Abada, we've got Maeda, we've got Jota. Okay, so Forrest's time is going to be limited in that sense. But if he's here on that basis, and he's happy with that, then I'm perfectly happy with that too. But so I kind of agree with Laura. But we can't blind ourselves to the realities of the performances that we see and the skills and attributes of the players. I mean, I was watching the second half, feeling a bit rueful. I'm glad he got his goal. I was delighted for him. I hope he gets to 100 as soon as possible. But my honest opinion is that he looks a man out of time. He looks a man in the wrong film. He's not really, going to give the types of attributes that the wingers in that team are going to give. Both without the ball and with the ball, unfortunately. And he's not going to get any quicker, and he's not going to get better at counter pressing, unfortunately. So that's the reality of it. If he's happy with that sort of bit part role, as I say, I hope he gets to 100 goals. I hope he gets to 120 goals. And if he stays another 5 years, helping the likes of Abada, I'll be absolutely delighted if Celtic is his only club. But I completely agree with Laura, only on the basis that that's the sort of role that he has.
I'm more upset, Alan, with the fact that you've just reminded me that there is age regression and time stands still for no man. Thanks again for that reminder.
Tell me about it.
Stubbsy's Horse, thank you very much. Yeah, good luck, Acsom, in the FCAs. As you can see on the right-hand side, we bang on about all the awards that we have previously won, thanks to our viewers backing us in this type of poll. If you want to vote for us, we're going for Best Video Creator, and the link is underneath the video. And if we get into the finals, it'll be a wee jolly down to Manchester, a place I really love for its culture, its football and its music as well. So thank you, every single one of you.
Paul, can I just jump in? Can I
Please
just jump in and say something before we go? I don't understand anybody. I wouldn't want to watch a Rangers podcast, particularly after they've just scalped another team 4-1. Having said that, we've always said this platform is open to everybody, and that includes Rangers supporters. If you're here watching, I hope your team does very well in Europe this season. I hope we beat you in the league. What I don't understand is people coming on to just spout abuse unnecessarily for whatever reason, I'm not sure. But if you're here to watch, just please try and be nice, I think is all I would say.
Absolutely. I mean, the big thing for me is there is abuse that you can laugh off, and then there's very personal abuse, Laura, that I think is it's got to be challenged both in real life, because it's very rare that you get it in real life, and also in this incredible reality that they call online social media. And the amount of abuse that is dished out is unacceptable. And we actually had one of our very regular commenters talking about some of the mental health issues that he's had recently. And I think people need to remember that words can be very, very upsetting to people, especially if they're already in a vulnerable state, Laura. So thanks for bringing that up. And what we're saying here, let's have a wee look here. How many? I don't know. I don't really know, but I'm blocking quite a few actually for coming in with that kind of nonsense. And there we go. And we'll continue to do that. And obviously, thank you all for supporting the channel. Everybody on the comment section, it's been brilliant to hear your thoughts on yet another great night for Celtic. We march on to the weekend with another two fairly big games coming up, Rangers and Real Madrid, and we will be there to cover every kick of the ball. All that's left for me to say is thank you, Laura, and thank you, Alan, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.